Hi, Laney College. We're very happy to have Laura Raynak here with us today. She is the first of our featured industry speaker series, and invited her today. Her background is in the health sciences and the biotech sciences, the life sciences, and she will talk about kind of the state of the union of the life sciences sector post-COVID or during COVID. Right now, things are changing as we speak. If you check out her bio on LinkedIn, it would say she's an executive search professional with corporate and external search experience. She locates, engages, and secures top performing candidates that are strong fit for her clients, direct experience in recruiting for biotechnology, medical device, life science, healthcare, information technology, and consumer health companies. Sample positions include independent board of directors, venture capitalists, CEOs, chief medical officers, chief financial officers, chief operations officers, chief commercial officers, and VPs in all corporate functions. Very impressive. And as my friend Susie O'Brien said to me earlier, you recruit for the C-level. That's you. Without further ado, why don't you go ahead and talk to us, and then at the end, we'll ask you some questions.
Hi, everybody. I'm honored to be here. So thank you so very much for asking me, Raya, and nice to meet you, Susie and Doug. It's interesting. I can give you sort of the overview of what people are doing now and what they're experiencing now, and then sort of what we think is going to happen post-COVID. We don't really know, but we're making plans. Right now, companies are sort of looking at their teams in general, not just management teams, but teams in general, and saying, who are our critical players? Who do we need to keep engaged and moving forward with our organization? So they're really hunkering down with that. Then they're looking at sort of like, what's our next sort of layer, people that we need to support the activities we have? Because even in healthcare, some people in healthcare are very, very busy, and some people are contracting. So if you're running clinical studies right now, which happens for medical device companies and biotech companies, their studies are pretty much on hold because people aren't going into the hospitals to continue the clinical studies. They're afraid to go to the hospital. So clinical studies got put on hold. So products aren't moving through the pipeline as quickly. That will ramp up post-COVID-19, particularly when we get more safety measures involved. And then also too, we're looking at ambulatory care centers versus hospitals. So more of the ambulatory care centers will be responsible for clinical study data collection and in meeting and managing patients. And then we also have companies that are commercial to the healthcare system. And in most areas of that, we have a little bit of a kind of a stoppage because doctors are not really seeing salespeople, and hospitals aren't really talking to salespeople, with the exception of the chief information officer. And right now there's an open window because they're not inundated with all these other things. They're looking at what sort of technologies can make our hospital more efficient. How can we integrate more telemedicine? How can we reduce our expenses in terms of how we treat patients? And they're looking at technology tools to make those things happen. So that's a great opportunity. But the rest, commercial new products on the market or trying to sell the hospital something else right now, it really isn't a popular idea. Mostly because I don't think anybody really wants to go to the hospital unless they have to right now. Post-COVID, there'll be a lot of pent-up demand, particularly for people who have sort of what we call elective surgery or elective procedures, including joint replacements. Maybe, you need to get a stent in your heart. Maybe you have something along those lines, right? Or the hospitals are also seeing a reduction in patients with major trauma. People aren't driving as much, not as many car accidents. People aren't doing big activities so much outside, so they're not breaking bones and getting in accidents that way either. And so the emergency room staffs are shrinking, and now people are only going to the emergency room if they're very severely ill. They're really holding out a long time. So it's been kind of interesting. You would think there'd be more people in the hospital now. There's actually fewer. It's all hands on deck for COVID. A lot of companies are pivoting their focus to COVID if they can. And so it's sort of like we're at war with COVID. So all the resources are moving towards that. The resources are moving away from other things that people would normally go to the hospital and get treated for. And another thing that's happening in the industry right now, which is probably the most concerning, is the supply chain interruption. So a lot of product, a lot of drugs are manufactured outside the United States and then imported in. So we have fewer international flights, fewer boats traveling across the ocean, fewer opportunities to get those products to the people who need them. So the supply chain's been disrupted, and we're not getting all the product that we would normally get when we need it. So that's why we're experiencing drug shortages, thermometer shortages, Band-Aid shortages, you name it, we're really having some difficulty. So what's this mean for companies that are hiring? Well, there's two critical hires will continue no matter what. So if you're a critical role or a hard to find role or something that's in short supply for organizations, which would be anybody who's super talented and can really execute well, that would be number one. But I would be thinking more in the lines of typical roles that are really hard to fill are engineering roles, biostatistics, and really strong on the marketing side, or chief medical officer, clinical people, always in demand. Regulatory affairs, always in demand. So those roles are going to pretty much go forward. A lot of the smaller companies put their hiring plans on hold, particularly if they are not, even if they are in the public market, but they're smaller organizations, because they don't really know what the financial impact is going to be long term. So they're trying to manage their cash as well as they can for the short term. We all know that once this is over, all the pent up demand, all the people who said, I'm not going to do that procedure now, I'm going to do it later, are going to come in and get those things done. So the demand will come, it's just going to be delayed. And for the bigger companies, so like the Johnson & Johnsons and the McKessons and the Merck and Novartis's and Roche's of the world, hiring is going to continue on because they're looking at things like vaccines and treatments, vaccines for things like COVID-19 and other SARS type viruses, and they're looking at treatment. What kind of drugs can we develop on a rapid basis? So there's a lot of need for scientists and people and engineers and whatnot to do all that. They're continuing to hire. And so I think post-COVID, a couple of things are going to happen. And I think they're going to be good things. I think we've figured out how to work remotely and effectively. So a lot of roles that we can go ahead and say, oh, we don't really need that person in the office every day, as long as they're collaborating with the team with tools like Slack and Trello and things like that. People are really using the tools. So people won't be required to come in. There will be physical distancing in your workplace. And I think office spaces are now starting to figure out where can we sit people so that they're not in such close proximity to each other, so they're not exposing each other to things like COVID-19. The other thing that my clients are talking about is shift work, like having a group of people come in at one shift and then a different shift. They're also considering things like, do we have a biosecurity plan? So if you come to work and you have a fever or you're sick, they may not allow you in the building. They may tell you to just go back home and stay home. So those are some of the things that the work environment is going to look like later, which creates whole opportunity for new technology tools and new opportunities for people to learn how to communicate with each other, maybe, and not be in the same, situation. So it's really going to require exceptional listening skills and a curiosity, like what somebody would say something and you're like, yeah, I don't know what they really meant by that. I better ask and find out what they really meant by that, so that there's better communication and understanding. Because when you're not in person, you miss a lot of cues. And we talk about the Zoom fatigue we get. We're like, why do we get so tired talking on Zoom all the time? Well, the reason we get tired talking on Zoom is we don't get the emotional feedback that we would normally get by being present with someone in the same room. So we're going to have to learn how to be better detectives and really understanding what's required of us and work on building tighter relationships from a distance and whatnot. There's just a lot to do, I think. Any questions?
Does anyone want to ask any questions right now?
Along the lines of the physical distancing, which you said will be happening, Do you think that employers are going to be actually testing people when they come to work? You said if someone has a fever or shows symptoms, do you think testing will be on kind of a broad scale or not?
I think it's a possibility, and I think it depends on the employer too. And it also depends on the availability of the testing. Right
Sure.
now, there's a real challenge. We have a test that says whether you have it currently or not, but we don't have a test that's a widely used test that says you've had it already and you have the antibodies. So it's a little, until we get more of those tests, it's going to be pretty hard.
Susie actually emailed me some questions yesterday because Susie's very efficient. And she said post-COVID, or maybe in between, when people are coming back to work, but we don't have a vaccine yet, but maybe things will open up where people will be coming back to work, and there will be probably more social distancing within the labs because of different shifts that will be occurring. Would employers typically provide PPE, personal protection equipment, for employees on site, like Amazon did not?
Absolutely. So. Yeah, absolutely. The people that I've been talking to and speaking with have all said we're going to make masks and gloves available to our employees so that they have them here so they can feel safer, in addition to the physical distancing. So what's that going to look like? Well, cube land was usually right on top of each other. There's going to be like every other cube is going to be occupied. And so that they aren't sitting in proximity to each other. And these open office spaces, that's probably going to be limited as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's very interesting. So on that note, since you're saying that we really don't have an antibody test yet that's regularly used in companies yet, but they probably, hopefully, is it that the antibody test is not perfected yet, or it's just we don't have enough of them to see who can go back to work and who can't?
We don't have enough of them. The technology is available, but it's not widely available. So we're having manufacturing. Back to the supply chain issue, we're really having a problem getting the supply chain right. So it's just slowing everything down.
Right. So really that's the key right now. Mm-hmm. The key is really to either test people before they go back to work, or at least test them for antibodies, because some people are asymptomatic, correct? So test them before they could go back into, I guess, a lab situation.
Well, so here's the thing. When people work in a lab, they're suited up, they're gloved, and they have long sleeves with a lab coat, and their hair is tied back. They have a mask, the shield and a mask. So that's going to be the future of lab work. And it should have been, it's most labs are like that anyway, depending if you're working with biological products. So there's a sterile environment there already. What we'll probably see, we're seeing the mask, the shield and the mask, that's an addition. That's the shield is new. And then making sure you're wearing your lab gear, your protective gear is going to be more mandatory. And I think what we're learning is that people who work in proximity to each other, who are often more exposed, if somebody positive comes in with the virus, they're more exposed if they're working closely together. So that's why physical distancing itself is going to be part of that as well. And I think there's we don't really understand this virus all that well. And we don't really understand transmission all that well. So until we get a better handle on that, I think it's going to be a lot of guesswork, a lot of PPE, and a lot of physical distancing, and working from home, working through Zoom, working with tools.
Doug's hand is up. So Doug, if you unmute yourself, go ahead.
I'll give this a shot. My audio is cutting out. It might be my connection. But yeah, I was just going to say regarding the testing, something I follow somewhat closely because it's my area, but there was a recent study of 14 different antibody tests, and 3 of the 14 were above 95% specificity. So basically, only one of them was really very reliable. And like you said, that would be a supply chain issue if we only had one source of a test. But one local company just announced today that was Biorad and Hercules, that they just got FDA approval for their antibody tests. So like one area that I'm tracking, because a lot of the diagnostic companies in our area, like Thermo Fisher, Biorad, perhaps like Novartis and Grifols and things like that, they'll be ramping up perhaps as they pivot COVID testing. Everyone's recognizing that it's an urgent problem, and they're going to all press for solutions. So
on that note, and Doug's note, so Doug is co-chair or the chair of the biomanufacturing program at Laney College. And he deals with a lot of people that either are, reinventing themselves and getting into biotechnology, or maybe coming back and just getting some, manufacturing skills. So with the social distancing and the labs and so forth, what do entry-level jobs look like during or post-COVID, immediately post?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very situational, company by company, and whether or not they have either a test or a product for the COVID-19. If they have a test or a product for COVID-19, they're probably going to be hiring in all areas of organization, and they're going to need some entry-level people. The skills that I think are going to be really important to have coming to work are really interpersonal and communication skills. It sounds really crazy, but also to an openness and a learning mentality where you come to work and you're like, I know, I want to learn as much as I can so that I can move forward. So it's going to require some curiosity and asking some questions so that you make sure you really understand and go forward. I also think that working with UC Santa Cruz on an intern program for the science, but of course, everybody's doing distance learning. How are we going to do this intern program? The intern programs have been shot. Zero. I don't know a single organization that's looking at bringing in interns, like somebody for a short period of time right now. Post-COVID, certainly. Right now, I think they're just heads around sort of what's our critical need, who's our critical teams and hires, and how do we get this resolved? On the entry-level hiring, I still see techs, laboratory techs, and manufacturing technicians, and people who can help sort of there, because that will help as the materials for the supply chain increase and as the number of tests increase. We're going to need more hands to get more work.
I have another question, and I know that Susie had a few too, but for me, I'm shifting. Let me ask Susie's questions because they're more related, and I'm going to ask you industry question after, actually regulatory question after. Another one of Susie's question was, will employers consider paying for antibody tests for certain workers now that the tests are becoming slowly available? Do you think, will the companies absorb those costs?
The reason I'm asking that question is I just got a notice from a doctor friend of mine that they now are offering 3 antibody tests. I've also read that there are a lot of false negatives with the antibody tests. They're not perfected. So if there's a false negative, it's kind of useless. But if it does get perfected and we do have the supply problem taken care of, it's still expensive, to get the testing. So I'm just wondering, is that something employers would consider paying for as opposed to putting that on the employee?
Well, I think it becomes a workers' compensation issue. I don't think it's a health issue. I think it becomes a workers' comp issue. And if it's under workman's compensation, the employers, because let's say somebody is, healthy, they go to work, they get exposed to somebody who has the virus, and then they get the virus. I think there's because it was a work-related incident, we end up in workman's comp.
Oh.
The potential for that. So I actually think the employers will be paying for these tests. And all employers over, I think it's five employees have to provide health insurance for their employees. I think we're going to be okay. I think that the employer is going to have to pay for it.
Okay.
My question, since you are our Yoda of the day, is if you put on your Yoda hat on, so as far as essential jobs or essential workers, there is talk within the community, the life sciences community, that I guess instruments, devices, and diagnostics, that's going to grow right now, would you say, because of COVID or in preparation for the coming instruments and the diagnostics that are coming out because of that? And the second part of my question is that you hear all these, stories about Elon Musk wanting to, he's going to create a ventilator and so forth, but they really can't create ventilators that rapidly because don't they all have to go through some sort of FDA approval?
Well, let me take the first question. Essential workers, yes, absolutely. All of life sciences is going to grow. I think this is what we would call the golden age of, I'm going to call it the golden age of biotech broadly, or life sciences, because here's a real opportunity to sort of help a lot of people. And it's all hands on deck. There's a lot of people looking at this. There's a lot of opportunity within that because there's going to be some growth. I also think that this biosecurity area is going to grow tremendously because of this, because I don't think this is the first or last big virus we're going to see. And it also showed us just how vulnerable we are to biowarfare. So I think there's going to be some real opportunities more broadly.
Can you define biosecurity just before you move on to the other?
So, yeah, sure. So biosecurity would be something like there's a sensor on the there's a sensor on the entryway to your office, and it scans you and it says and it's been taking your temperature over a period of time. So like if you run low, like some people run below 98.6, right, and you show up with a 99, that could be a high temperature for you, but for somebody else it would be low. They could say you're flagged, you've got a fever, you need to not come into work today. That's what I'm talking about. That sort of technology that monitors people's health more closely. I think the Apple Watch and your cell phones are going to get a lot smarter about what's really going on with you physically. So I think there's opportunities there. And so in addition to, we're going to make more tests available, we're going to create more drugs to treat this, we're going to have more opportunities broadly to take care of people better. And we're going to really use healthcare information technology to look at the data and to also deploy medicine, telemedicine. Oh, it's about time, right? Work from home, it's about time. I think we've been waiting for this because we have the technology to do it. So I think these are the good things I think are happening. And then the second part of the question was, remind me.
I don't know. I mean, you hear of all these people that were never in the ventilator, business. Oh, yeah. All of a sudden saying, oh, we're going to make all these ventilators and put them out. But ventilators are an instrument or diagnostic, or it's an instrument. So, I mean, they have to go through federal approval as well. It's not going to be that quickly.
Well, actually, no, because the device is already made and major manufacturers for the ventilators released all their manufacturing plans, all the how to build them and how to put them together. They're already approved by the FDA. They're just having somebody else manufacture it. It's not creating what they call a de novo or a new device. It's actually creating something that already exists.
I see. So that was my big question of the month.
Technology that's available.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's why they're able to do it so quickly.
Yeah, it's like, what the heck? I was wondering about that. Even everyone's saying, oh, I'm going to make all these ventilators. And it's like, it has to be, well, if they're going to make it anyway, I mean, even if they have the blueprint and the protocols, they still would have to be tested by some sort of FDA approved organization to say, okay, we could use it on people, right?
I think the manufacturing facility needs to be FDA approved.
Yeah.
Not the device itself.
All right. So Tesla is not going to be spewing out these things at the Tesla plant in Fremont.
Maybe if they get FDA approval for the manufacturing site, yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Most likely what will happen is they'll contract manufacture. They'll hire a manufacturing facility that does contract manufacturing, and they'll send their design to the contract manufacturer.
I see. That's true. That is true. Okay, so I think this has been a nice half hour. Any positive things you'd like to close off with, Laura?
I think that even though it's a really difficult time for many, many, many people, I think that there's a lot of things that are good that are going to come from this. And I am hopeful that we actually become more human as a society, and that we really understand each other's dilemmas a little bit better. I think some people are really, really suffering through this. and other people are not so much. And I think that the more compassion we can have for each other, and the more we look at how can we contribute, where are opportunities for me to grow, what sort of work do I enjoy doing, and I want to do that work, and really creating a little more balance in your life too. I think these are all wonderful things that'll come out of this. But I think the hard part is just not knowing how long this is going to last, and how we're really suffering financially. And we really need to take a look at how we can help take care of those people in the interim.
Yeah.
We're doing a tremendous job, but I just don't think it's everything or enough.
Yeah. Doug, do you have any final word?
Oh, yeah, as far as hope, I think I'm very hopeful to see that my students are out working in the industry, because biotech is essential. We've been talking about essential industry. Even though some of them are working from home, I've seen some of them do some online credentialing programs and post that to their LinkedIns. And so they're being very productive with the time. And I've been learning a lot of new things about badges and online certifications that I'd never heard about before, which is really cool. So yeah, it's exciting to see where they're going with it. And hopefully the stuff I'm learning from is like, I want to incorporate this in our program, because we don't know what the future holds, and we could kind of have this on again, off again kind of shutdown if we have more outbreaks or viruses. So yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
And I think it's been tremendous how the colleges have all kind of like quickly rallied and moved everything online, and are trying to navigate through that. That has got to be a big challenge, right?
Doug, has it been a challenge?
Oh yeah, it has. It's been a big challenge. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, how do you do lab online? You really can't. You know, we have welding programs and carpentry there, you know, and biotech, biomanufacturing is in the same boat. We can't really teach people how to pipette unless they hold a pipette, you know, so.
How are you doing
it? There are some simulations that district, or I guess the community college system bought for all the colleges around the state, but you're moving a mouse and you're picking up a pipette in quotes with a cursor, you know. So it's just not the same.
Wow.
Any final words, Susie?
Well, just to add to what Laura said, I like the fact that going forward, we're probably going to be doing more remote work, you know, as a society. And I think that is a positive thing for our environment. We can get some of the cars off the road, and people don't spend 4 hours a day commuting, so they have more time with their families and, you know, themselves, time for self-care. And I think that's something that we as a society haven't really honored that much. And so now we may be forced to, but I think it'll, in the end, be a really good outcome.
Well, thank you, Laura, so much. Do you have any, yes.
Thank you.